This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. My guest today is the big-hearted Griff Green, the founder of Giveth and a digital currency expert. With his passion, experience, and insightful knowledge of the Ethereum ecosystem, Griff has become a key player and a well-loved one in the world of cryptocurrency. In fact, he holds the world's first master's degree ever given on the topic. Griff's vision is to build a world where people who produce value for society are rewarded fairly for the value they produce. And he's putting his money where his mouth is, having founded Giveth to build the future of giving. But that's just the beginning. Griff founded the Commons Stack to take Giveth to the next level, to do the applied research needed to build startup regenerative economies that support the production of public goods. In this episode, Griff shares his fascinating journey, including the time he and a colleague stole 10% of all ether in existence to prevent hackers from stealing it in the hack herd around the world. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Griff's insights on censorship and the Twitter files will leave you amazed and wondering how social media platforms can better promote free speech. Griff also touches on Eleanor Ostром's Tragedy of the Commons and how it partly inspired him to create Giveth, a platform that aims to bring honesty and value to nonprofits. We also discuss the meta crisis, exploring the existential risks facing humanity and how we could address them through collective intelligence and collaboration. And of course, no conversation with Griff would be complete without touching on the current state of digital currencies. He discusses the potential of non-US dollar-backed currencies and central bank digital currencies. With his expertise in the field, Griff is uniquely positioned to shed light on the potential benefits and risks of these quickly emerging technologies. This episode is jam-packed with insights that will leave you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride. Griff Green, so glad to be here with you today, man. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. It's worked out very serendipitously, as our meeting was initially at Loveburn, and now I'm here in Miami at the Tunny Money Bank Vault, which is an NFT project. So it's very fitting.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah, exactly. And in that full circle, let's start at the beginning of it. I think I have a good entry point. Being that Dogecoin has been making the news since yesterday, it is April 6th today, and Twitter obviously announced that they were adding the Dogecoin logo to their site, which caused a spike in it. But I also found this quote about you online when I was pulling together your bio, and it goes, "Doge-loving hippie hacker steals crypto before bad guys can." And this is kind of your origin story, right? So can you just tell us about that and how you came to hold 10% of all ether in existence at one point in time?
Sure. Yeah, man, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, I originally got into crypto just because I was enthused with the tech. Well, of course, because I hated the banks, and it was more of a revolutionary mindset against things that brought me to crypto. And then when I found out that this technology could actually maybe even replace governments or change the way we structure around the problems governments solve, I got really stoked. And the first project that I really started working on full on was called The DAO. It was part of a project that I was part of a company called Slockit. And our goal was to build a universal sharing economy where anyone or anything could post, kind of like Craigslist. It could post an ad saying, "Hey, I want this thing." Or it could also buy something on this universal sharing network. And the idea was we could have smart locks and lockers, and you could unlock the locker. And with some Ethereum, the lock would just open, you get stuff inside. Really cool, right? The problem was, of course, that someone's going to put weed in that locker, and start selling some drugs or whatever. Also, we really wanted to be kind of maybe illegal or have an organization that was global and not part of the different regulatory situations. So we wanted to create a DAO. And it was before DAOs were really a thing. And so actually we called it the DAO. But Most people don't know this, but that wasn't supposed to be the name. The idea was that the DAO would name itself later. We just didn't get to that point because when we launched, it was an incredible launch. We actually became the largest crowdfunding project that ever have happened to that point. We raised $150 million. That was 14% of all Ether in existence. At the time, Ether was like $10, right? Now it's, I don't know, 1,800 or something today. So yeah, this was early days in Ethereum. In fact, the programming language that we used to write the code that the DAO was made of, man, let me back up. So Ethereum is a blockchain like Bitcoin, right? But then on the Ethereum blockchain, it's really easy to write what they call our smart contracts. Smart contracts, it sounds complicated. It's just a program that can hold money. That's it. Like, it's just a computer program that can hold money, and it holds money itself. And this was something that was really exciting for us in the Universal Sharing Network, because actually the locker itself could be, that's like, that's holding the money. It could be its own profitable entity, its own autonomous agent. When its lock gets a little, crunchy, it could have a program in it that says, hey, post an ad to get someone to oil me for 20 cents, like you could start creating these autonomous agents that are autonomous in their own economic way, right? This is so early, though, that when we raised so much money, we became a target. And the programming language that these smart contracts were written in was only 8 months old, and we had a big bug. And a hacker came in and stole $50 million out of our project. So that was really scary. And so like the same day we recreated part of Slockit, me and another Slockit guy kind of split off to figure out what to do with the hack. And then we figured out how to also hack the DAO and take all the money. People wrote books about this, by the way. This is like a really crazy adventure in Ethereum history, right? And so we waited until more people decided to hack the DAO, because we didn't know what was illegal or what wasn't illegal. And so then more people started hacking the DAO, and we were able to be the better of the hackers, of the second round of hackers, and steal most of that money, and even hack the other hackers that hacked the DAO. So that it was this crazy experience of DAO wars, is what we called it. And we were able to take all of the rest of the money in the DAO and protect it until the community had a hard fork and stole all the money back and gave it to the people who originally put money into the DAO. So we were able to just kill the project. Everyone got their money back, and the hacker was robbed, right? But that's what we thought. But this was a very unique situation where, even though all that money was given back to the people who actually put it in there in the first place, with blockchain tech, there's something really interesting where you can't impose your values on other people. So in 2016, the concept of blockchain was like, this is an immutable ledger. It's a ledger where you can't break the rules. And what we found out with the DAO is actually it's not immutable. It's based off of community consensus. So if everyone says we should change the rules, then we change the rules. And because in the end, there are open source programs that are running code, and that code can be changed. It can add little lines. And for the DAO, we added a line that said, hey, if your contract is any one of these contracts, all the money that's in it goes to this contract where the DAO token holders can get their money back, right? We added that line into the program, and everyone in Ethereum started running this new program. But the old code still existed, where that money is not taken from the hacker or us, right? So in that old code, people could still run it, and Bitcoiners who don't like Ethereum generally started running that code. And of course, lots of people ran that code. It's hard to just say Bitcoiners and Ethereum, but for the most part, everyone in Ethereum stayed with adding this new set of code so that the money was taken from the hacker and given back to everybody. But a large group of Bitcoiners started running the old code that is now called Ether Classic. And in the Ether Classic blockchain, the hack was not reversed, right? The hacker still has the money.
It's like an alternate timeline.
Yeah. It's like a parallel dimension, right? And really the parallel dimension is the current Ethereum, you could say. And that like there was a fork in this timeline where now there are two Ethereums. Which Ethereum is what? How do both tokens have value? Well, most of the value stayed with the blockchain where the hacker had the money taken, and that is what we call Ethereum today. But the people who wanted to kind of protect this meme of immutability started buying Ether Classic. And so even though everyone who had Ether also had Ether Classic, and the only difference between the two blockchains is in Ethereum, the hacker's money was taken and given back to the people who put into the DAO. And in Ether Classic, the hacker still has money. And also we still have money. We had 10% of all Ether Classic in existence, because at one point we held 10% of all Ether in existence. So now this is what makes this the craziest hack that ever happened, where everybody won. The hacker made money. Everybody who put money in got their money back. Like a new currency was created basically to reward the hacker, almost, it feels like, and to protect the meme of immutability. It was a crazy experience for sure. And that was what got me started in the crypto space.
Man, the hack herd round the world. So
Yeah.
wild. And that's brought you all the way around to, well, actually, first let's stick on that tip of I brought up Dogecoin, and I know
Yeah.
you have an old love for Dogecoin. So what do you make of, obviously, Elon Musk, who owns Twitter, is a big proponent of Doge, and he's most certainly directly or indirectly behind that being added to the Twitter website and caused a 35% surge in the coin yesterday. What do you make of all this?
Honestly, I feel like it's kind of a distraction from some of the other things that he's doing with Twitter right now, like turning off making people pay for the API that used to be free. And that's like I love that Doge is on there. So like we met at Loveburn. My first art car for the main Birdie Man was actually a giant Doge. And that's where the line from the article came from. So I'm a Doge fan. Like back in the day, like 2014, 2015, all the crypto communities were just all about money. But the Ethereum community and the Doge community were the two communities that were really lovey-dovey and fun to hang out in on Reddit chat rooms and stuff. So like, yeah, I love Doge. But I think Elon's just using it to distract us from the fact that he's doing some crazy stuff with taking so many applications that were dependent on this API that Twitter could use are turned off now. And they'll never work again, or they have to pay $100 a month basically to work.
Isn't Twitter also incentivizing where tweets are going to only show up in people's feeds based on if they're paying members or not?
Yeah. What's interesting, I mean, I will applaud Elon for open sourcing the Twitter algorithm so that you can see what will actually make your tweets be visible, right? But one of the things that makes your tweets visible is, did you give Elon $7, And it's like, yeah, okay.
It's such a bigger thing, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur and developer, I mean, you think about any project that obviously needs to generate revenue to survive, but also to value those who invest so much time and energy into it. Now, there are fair ways of looking at value versus, ways that could be quite greedy, but how do we build these systems? And this is top of mind as ChatGPT 4 has been released, and it's all of a sudden overnight turned Bing, the laughing stock of the search world, into the belle of the ball. And one of the things I keep on thinking about is, man, like one of the main differences between search, like a regular search engine versus GPT, is with search, you don't control the information. It's either referencing other content that people have created, or it's referencing paid content. And the paid has made its way so high up where you have very little control of how to steer that ship when you're in that search world. Now, GPT, it's a closed large language model, so it's only set to that data. But in a current state, you're the driver of that information. You could tell the machine how to access it, how to think about it, and how to present it to you, which is totally world changing. So, do you think it stays in a form that doesn't get co-opted by some type of paywall or monetization where we lose that control?
I mean, it's already been co-opted, right? Or it's already been, I mean, it starts out that way. It's nice that it's given away for free, like the older version, but I think ChatGPT 4, I think you have to pay.
Yeah,
No?
it's $20 a month, or if you're on, I think, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
paying a $20 subscription and then also on their wait list for like their API, which I don't know if that's free or you have to pay for that, but either way.
You definitely pay per query or something like that. But it's actually pretty cheap.
Yeah,
It's really cheap.
and look, paying for use is very different than a payment structure that incentivizes the application to alter the data and the interfacing with the
Mm.
data based on who's paying what and for what reasons.
Yeah.
And this gets into that larger topic of, you know, the freedom of speech and censorship that's happening in myriad ways. Obviously, back to Twitter, the Twitter files are exposing the depths at which, right? I mean, different
Yeah.
organizations and governmental agencies, politicians are all getting their hands in there. So what do you make of it?
I mean, it's really interesting, these different business models that people come up with, right? And it's like, okay, we can we can do advertising models where we inundate people with things that they don't really want, but or maybe they do want, but like these advertisers really want them to see this. And so you can pay for your message to be spoken, and then like to bring people to see that message, you give something really cool away for free, right? And so it's kind of like this weird backdoor payment, you know?
Mm.
And I don't know, is that right? Is that wrong? Like the real challenge, the real problem, underlying problem is that it's really difficult to provide non-excludable goods to society. So like there's four types of economic goods, and they're kind of broken up into like, is it excludable or non-excludable? And is it rivalrous or non-rivalrous? And this is macro econ 202, 201.
And can you just unpack each of those really quickly, just for the layman, including myself?
Yeah, so there's private goods, which are excludable and rivalrous. This would be like your cell phone, right? You have to buy the cell phone. You don't get the cell phone for free. And if I'm using the cell phone, it's rivalrous because it really would impede your enjoyment of the cell phone, right? Whereas a movie theater is excludable. You have to pay to play. You have to buy a ticket to go to the movie. But if I'm watching the movie and you're watching the movie, as long as I'm not being a dick, it'll be fine. You know, we'll both enjoy the movie together. And the cool thing about those excludable goods is that there's business models, very clean business models. I buy a ticket, I get a service. I give you some money, you give me an object, right? Like simple profit, cost, revenue, and also in that space, economic systems like business models, and there's like this win-win coordination system that makes it really easy, right? Like there's this famous quote from Milton Friedman where there's like a video of him holding a pencil, and it's basically saying, like, you know, I'm going to really stretch and paraphrase here, but he's basically saying, think how hard it would be for a government to coordinate around creating this pencil. They have to manage every process and get someone to plant the rubber trees and plant the wood for the pencil and mine the metal. But if it was like top down, like completely controlled government system, but in a free market system, people grow trees. They're, you know, it's so much easier to coordinate. You know, different people are doing different things to make money, and the coordination just happens without really communicating, because profit acts as a Schelling point, right? Everyone's got spreadsheets that tell them if they do this, they will make money, and money becomes this like Schelling point, this focal point that aids in coordination. But then on the other side of the economic goods spectrum are non-excludable goods. So non-excludable goods like the forest, for instance, it's really hard to exclude someone from a forest. It's like, that's a big fence if you're going to fence in that forest. So forests are non-excludable. But if I go in and chop down some wood, that's going to impede someone else's enjoyment of the forest. Or, if we overlog the forest, or if we burn the forest down, like it's a common pool resource. It's a non-excludable, but rivalrous. Another one is like fish in a bay. If I go and fish the bay, right, and I take the fish out of the bay, that makes it harder for other people to catch fish in the bay. Then there's public goods, and public goods are the best of the economic goods. This is like clean air or radio waves, right? If I turn on the radio, if I create a radio station, everyone gets to enjoy the radio. I can't stop someone from enjoying the radio, like the radio waves are there. It's really hard to block them, but also it's non-rivalrous. Like if someone is listening to the radio, it doesn't stop someone else from listening to the radio. It doesn't impede on their enjoyment. But the radio I wanted to move to that example instead of clean air, because how do you fund the radio, right? Like how do you fund these non-excludable goods? With the forest and fish in a bay, they actually make them club goods or toll goods. They make them like the movie theater, right? They actually say, you have to have a national park pass. And that will fund the park. Taking care. You want to fish in this bay, you have to have a license, right?
And you could only catch X number, and they have to be a minimum size of so on.
Yeah. If we wanted to instead keep this, what is a common pool resource, the fish in a bay example is a common pool resource. And when the government says you have to buy a fishing license, they actually turn it into a club good. They make it like a ticket to a movie theater. They're moving it into this different economic type of good. If we wanted to keep it as a common pool resource, then the government would instead actually go in and breed more fish instead of a fishing license, right? And that would be a different strategy. But the problem is that when we're working with non-excludable goods, you either need to have like a really weird business model like advertising on the radio, or you need governments and nonprofits, both of which have horrible coordination failures and really bad business models, basically, right? Like governments are like, listen, give us your money or we're going to take your house,
Yeah, does this kind of get into Eleanor Ostrom's Tragedy of the Commons?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the real sad thing is that it shouldn't take governments or nonprofits, because there is value here, right? There's value in radio, there's value in forests, there's value in fish in a bay. We should be able to coordinate effectively without governments and without nonprofits. And Eleanor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in Economics, first female to ever win the Nobel Prize in Economics. And she won it for basically disproving the tragedy of the commons. Tragedy of the commons is this old tale that became economic fact in the 60s, or maybe even before that, but it was very popular in the 60s. It basically said, we need governments to protect our shared resources. It's the only way. Because people are too dumb to talk to each other. I mean, I'm very much summarizing, obviously. But the idea was that, hey, if we have a pasture, like a shared grass field that can only handle 100 cows, what's the incentive to stop someone from putting in the 101 cow, 102 cow? They mathematically benefit from doing it on a short term. But Eleanor Ostrom was like, yeah, but that's not what happens. The people grazing cattle talk to each other, that they're smart. They see that if they overgraze the land, they'll coordinate and make rules amongst themselves that fit the current circumstances.
Like our indigenous people have done throughout history in most parts of the world, right? There are exceptions, but largely speaking. Now, when you look at this, right, the economic model that is predicated on never-ending expansion is the reason that, that wouldn't work. Because if you're
Mm.
in that mindset, then yes, it's greed. It's more, 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 more. When this points to the reality of considering something larger than just the transaction or even the other humans, but actually the natural resources, the natural world, and Mother Earth at large.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, these resources just don't make it to a spreadsheet, you know? And the crazy thing is corporations are set up to have a financial duty towards their spreadsheets. If there's a factory on a river, it has a fiduciary duty to pollute that river, you know?
Hmm.
Other if it's going to cost $5,000 to take care of its pollution ethically, and they just take that direction, their shareholders could sue them. They have to pollute the
Hmm.
river.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they will effectively be not breaking the law per se, but effectively they will be doing wrong by the contracts that they have signed.
And then you look at, all right, so what are the alternatives they find when they learn, all right, we can't dump this toxic stuff into the waterways? Well, let's take it and turn it into another product, right? I think fluoride is a great example
Yeah.
of this, right? Obviously a famous one, which still, there's still a lot of people out there that somehow don't know about. Incredibly toxic chemical, which was a waste product from another process, and it was too toxic to dump. So they somehow decided that this was going to be good for helping people fortify their teeth, despite knowing how toxic it was. And so that became sold to the toothpaste companies and put in all of our toothpaste, or back then, and put in the water supplies. And
Water.
it's we don't need, that's a whole other episode we can go down the rabbit hole on. But
Yeah.
it's just these misaligned interests behind how we're relating to each other and how we're defining governance, where there's all these ulterior motives, is really broken. And of course, finance comes into being a great motivator there. So let's shift over to Giveth, your current company that focuses on resolving some of these issues.
Yeah. So this is the dream, is that there is value in fish in a bay, right? There is value in radio waves. There's value in clean air, clean water, in taking care of the homeless, and all these things that nonprofits do and governments do. So we should be able to create models that sustain them, that aren't perverted by advertising and weird business models that aren't really all that beneficial for the people who are participating all the time. There's like these little tricks where they get taken advantage of. And there's also like very weak entrepreneurial opportunities in these non-excludable goods. And so the goal of Giveth is actually to meet nonprofits where they are, but give them the tools to create models that are actually functional, that actually support the greater good and are more bottom up than top down. So Giveth rose out of the ashes of the DAO is the project I started next, to take the lessons of the DAO and apply them to a less risky kind of endeavor, which is the nonprofit space. And that may seem kind of crazy, but honestly, it actually is very strategic. I am a crazy anarchist. Okay, guilty as charged. I really think that we can do better than governments at supporting non-excludable goods. Governments are the dominant form of providing value to society at large. We can do better. We can do better. And Giveth is starting with nonprofits, because when governments fail to provide value that society demands, people start nonprofits. Nonprofits are already the natural alternative to governments. And so our goal is to bring economic models to nonprofits that are honest, that aren't business models based off satisfying advertisers, but actually just focus on the value that's being created and coordinated around the human capital that's being generated around providing value to society, making sure that that can make it to a spreadsheet, that we can quantify this qualitative value. And this is the challenge, of course, of doing this, but it's already been done. This is a trail that's been blazed. We're not just hoping this will work. It's already working. Bitcoin is actually the first example of of this economic model that's providing a public good to society. So, and this may feel like a stretch, but anyone in the world can create a Bitcoin address, and it doesn't stop anyone else from creating a Bitcoin address. And with that address, you can receive money from anyone else in the world. There is international global financial rails put in by the Bitcoin network that anyone can access, and it doesn't come from taxes, and it doesn't come from donations. It actually comes from issuance, the creation of a currency. And every 10 minutes, Bitcoin is given to people who are running the computers that provide this global financial infrastructure. Then they create demand for Bitcoin. And the demand is built into the network in a relatively simple way. It's the only asset that you can transfer. And when you transfer Bitcoin from one place to another, you have to pay a fee. Now, the problem with Bitcoin, of course, is that it wasn't thought fully about how it would evolve. The original Bitcoin white paper was that it was going to be one computer can run one mining machine. And so it was going to be much more egalitarian. But engineers found ways to make giant data centers with specialized equipment that are really good at mining Bitcoin. Its original vision was not this, but now it is basically the more electricity you spend, the more Bitcoin you can mine. And this creates an existential risk because Bitcoin goes to $1 million, like Balaji was saying recently. There's like a bet that Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million in a couple months. If that happens, that would be horrible. That would be absolutely horrible because that would be an incentive. Every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoin are being given to the Bitcoin miners. And so now there's an incentive to spend $6 million worth of electricity if Bitcoin goes to $1 million. $6 million worth of electricity to mine Bitcoin. Like power plants in Latin America would just stop providing power to people and buy mining rigs and start mining Bitcoin because that would be more profitable than supporting their local community. This creates real issues if Bitcoin goes to $1 million. So Ethereum also is another system that is using issuance and creating demand for that issuance to provide value to society, but they moved to proof of stake. So we can do this without the electrical issues. But both of these organizations, it's a lot easier because they're still basically saying, hey, do this like computer work for our community, provide this infrastructure that we can really easily measure, and you will get rewarded. I want to take this same model where you're issuing a token and then you're creating demand for that token and apply it to meat space, the real world. Instead of a movie theater, you're throwing movies in a park, and when you're throwing movies in a park, everyone is sacrificing. Some people are, at least the people who are actually making the movie in the park happen. Somebody's got to bring the projector. Somebody's got to bring the screen. That someone's got to pick the movie, and someone's got to, bring the chairs, and all these things. They don't get rewarded. It's basically a nonprofit. But what if we could issue a token that is mined every time a movie in a park is thrown, right? So many tokens are given to the people who put the projector in, and the people who bring the screen, and the people who bring the chairs, or and all these things. And then you start bringing other models where people who, like, if you want to sell popcorn, you got to have so many tokens to sell popcorn, and you got to burn those tokens, or you got to lock those tokens. Maybe if you want to, who gets to pick what movie and what park it's being played in, well, maybe the token holders, right? The people who have the most tokens. And so you can create demand for that token, and maybe have like premium services, kind of like if you have a lot of tokens, then you can like sit in the front row on the nice blankets, so you can create demand for this token and issue the token to the people creating value, and you can have an economic model around providing open value for the community. And that's kind of what we're hoping to be able to create for nonprofits on the Give platform.
And these tokens, can they be purchased, or it's only through engaging and participating within the activities that you can be granted tokens?
It's very important that they can also be purchased, because that's how you get this market dynamic. You end up having people who earn the tokens, but maybe they don't want to just like be the ones who get to choose a movie every time. They've already watched all their favorite movies with their tokens, you know? So there's other people who like, ah, hey, it's my girlfriend's birthday. She really loves Up, you know, and I want to make sure that the park near her house is going to play this movie and I can invite all our friends. I just have to buy these tokens. And that's great. That's super cool. But at the same time, there might be an issue around governance and being all totally plutocratic, because you really need some kind of non-plutocratic involvement as well. It's really nice to have a reputation token where the people who are bringing the projectors, people bringing the screens, the people who are coordinating the whole process, they get some monetary tokens that they can sell, but they should also get some kind of reputation token that gives them other rights that can't be sold. And that kind of creates a more positive economic system, because it can't just all be about money, monetary value. You really need to involve, like, this is the cool thing with blockchain. There's so many interesting things happening in blockchain tech, but it's all about money for so many people. And that becomes the dominant narrative. But really, it's tokens are access rights. It's permissions. Some of those permissions can be bought and sold, but that's not even that interesting. The interesting stuff is when you're actually creating an economic system where you give different rights for different reasons, and some of them can be bought and sold, and some of them can only be earned.
Mm. Yeah, it gets complex, right? When we start looking at different types of value and how we hold those, carry them, and exchange them.
It gets complex, but games are complex, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
you play these World of Warcraft or any of these games, they're pretty complex. But the cool thing is now with blockchain tech, we can create economic games. And yes, they might be complex, but instead of just like, you know, having a firefight with Counter-Strike, you know, shooting people or whatever in a video game and you're entertained, we can create the same kind of gamification experience, but you're actually helping the homeless or taking care of the environment, and you're earning points. At its best, money should be happiness points. The problem is that most money is made in the business system and costs can be externalized. So in our current monetary system that's driven purely by the free market of business models, you actually make more money by externalizing costs. So money doesn't become happiness points. But if value that is created for society could also be on those spreadsheets, and we could have multiple types of money that actually allow for value of all types to end up on a spreadsheet, money could actually be happiness points. Imagine an economy that is built around keeping the river clean. And we have this factory who has a fiduciary duty to pollute that river. Well, if we create this economic game where the people who are cleaning the river the best actually get tokens, and there's a demand for that token, then they can say, hey, factory, how about we give you $2,500 a month to cover half the cost of taking care of your pollution ethically. And we do a huge marketing campaign about how you're taking care of your pollution in an ethical way and how great of a factory you are. Because, you know, it's not like the factory's only creating pollution. They are creating some kind of widget that everybody wants. They're creating something of value for society. It's just they're incentivized to externalize their costs. But if there's another group who's like, no, actually, this has these costs, like this externalization of your cost is actually creating a destruction of value. We care about that value. And so we're creating a way to quantify that value, not necessarily the value of the river, but the value of the work to keep the river clean. And we can compete on these spreadsheets. You know, we can say, here's a solution where you're not breaking your fiduciary duty because clean rivers have value, and there are systems to protect that value. And that's the dream, that we could actually turn money into happiness points. And actually, these corporate systems that seem like they're all bad, they're actually really great. The problem is we just don't have a way to protect the things that society values at large that are non-excludable. That's at least my hypothesis, is this is the core issue in our society. And it's starting to become a huge problem. We're talking about AI and all the different issues that we have today. If we don't learn how to coordinate globally around the major issues of our time, we are so fucked. We are so fucked in so many ways.
And to this point, you're speaking about the idealistic aspect of these decentralized distributed systems, which have the ability to self-govern and come to consensus in very organic ways. And then we look at the reality of the government of our countries, which are incredibly centralized and top down. Let's look at what's going on globally right now. China and Russia coming together to take the greenback off of their monetary, go back to a gold back standard. And then on top of it, we have these new world currencies where the monitoring control currencies, which the Federal Reserve has a lot of plans to put in place for the US. How do we compete with that? And if you want to talk a little bit about what those are, that would be great too.
Yeah, like the CBDCs, the
Thank
central
you.
bank digital currencies. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I mean, just to go back a level, like about how we compete with that. First off, we never had a chance to compete with that before. It is only now that we can start to compete because of this technology. You used to have an army to create an economic system. Now you just need to know a couple of nerds.
Right. Or it was people that would stand up in arms against the governing body to fight against it. But now it gives you a seat at the table in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now we can start our own economies and they can live outside of national borders, And it was very difficult before. And I mean, not impossible. There have been community currencies for hundreds of years, for sure, thousands of years. But the dominant currencies of our day were always run by armies. But now Bitcoin has a higher market cap than most banks. That's crazy. That's crazy. In many countries, it has a higher market cap than many countries. Most countries, I'm sure over half countries. So it's like now we're starting to have dominant bottom-up currencies, right? And so there's an opportunity to compete, which that's just huge in itself. But a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, makes a lot of sense for nation states because honestly, and the Federal Reserve has been looking at this since at least 2014. Like I remember there was a guy who worked for the Federal Reserve that was talking about FedCoin in early 2014, back when I was really diving into this stuff. So it's been on the roadmap for a while, and it's really just about warming us up to it, because a digital currency, like cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, it's the next evolution of money. It's programmable money. Money used to be just numbers. It was just a number. It didn't have these other rules attached to it. You put the rules on top of the money. But wouldn't it be more powerful if you're controlling the rules of the money anyway? If you're saying like, hey, you're only allowed to travel with $10,000. You can't bring more than $10,000 with you on a thing. Well, you can make that a rule, right? With digital currencies, that can be part of the program. You try to transfer to someone who has more than $10,000 and the transfer fails. You don't have to worry about stopping it because the enforcement's baked in. Taxes could be automated in many ways. So the capital controls, super easy. Oh, what, this guy's a terrorist? Delete his money. And you don't need to go through a bank to figure that out. Digital currencies, and it makes sense for nation states that want to control their economic systems because it gives you more control. Now, is that a bad thing? Not inherently. The only reason it's a bad thing is because we don't trust our governments. Technology is not good or bad. The problem is that governments naturally create a monopoly. We always think monopolies are bad, right? Well, governments have a monopoly over every public goods vertical that they decide to participate on. They have a monopoly over education. They have a monopoly over healthcare in most countries, a monopoly over building roads, a monopoly over XYZ, whatever you want, right? So when they have a monopoly over the currency, or I mean, there's this like how much power does the Federal Reserve have versus how much power does the government have? These questions are going to be coming to light more and more. The way the system is coming to some kind of pinnacle pretty soon. Banks are starting to shut down. The people aren't necessarily believing in fiat currencies as much as they used to. There's some real issues here, and we'll see, because in the end, the Federal Reserve is basically backstopped by the US government. And if the Federal Reserve continues to run at a deficit, which normally they don't run at a deficit, normally they're actually like making money off interest consistently, and because they're backed by all these US treasuries and blah, blah, blah. If they continue to run at a deficit and people lose faith that they can handle their budget, in the end, the government could take over the Federal Reserve for sure. And so these things are really weird. This whole economic system that we have, you think crypto is complex, Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies that I'm talking about? Like, dude, the Federal Reserve system is out of this world complex. And it will eventually be a CBDC. I think just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they announced Fed Now, which is an upgrade of the FedWire system in a way where banks that are participating in the FedNow system can send instant transfers using technology that is very similar, that you could say is blockchain tech. They're kind of just warming us up to this eventuality. We're just using, digital currencies, central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, or there ends up being some type of dramatic event, or some natural or man-made disaster where it becomes a seemingly logical jump to move to that, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, that makes total sense, and they accept it, right? It's like, the problem with that is it gives away rights that are never given back, and we've seen this
Yeah.
done with just about every large scale event that's happened. I mean, even if you look at 9/11, the Patriot Act, where all of a sudden they could label someone a terrorist and strip these rights, and now, like in this past year, they've introduced, with going back to the freedom of speech issues, there's misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Are you familiar with this? And so,
I did not hear of
yeah, so
malinformation.
malinformation, it's tricky because it's a very subjective thing. But if the government, agencies determine that someone is putting out malinformation, they're labeled a terrorist. And once they're labeled a terrorist, they're able to strip them of their rights. And so these things become quite subjective. And as we see, again, if we point back at just the Twitter files, because that's one that's got the sunlight shining on it right now, we see how much there are bad players in these different government bodies and other corporations that are manipulating these systems. And so that's obviously one of the greatest fears of how do we take what could be an amazingly beneficial technology and ensure that it's wielded with responsibility when it's coming through a centralized government. And then look at the Federal Reserve, which isn't a governmental body, but again, a corporate body, which is playing by a whole other set of rules, which aren't to the American public's, interest per se.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest issue here is what you mentioned early, is this issue of like, there's going to be what happens when there's catastrophic issues, and they, use that as an excuse to take away our rights, which happened with the pandemic, is going to happen with 9/11. It'll happen with whatever issues come up, because that's how they get more power, and that's the game of a government, right? How do I get more power? That's what else is the point of that system? And the issue here is that we don't coordinate well around global issues. Governments can coordinate okay around national issues within their borders, They can manage things. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's it's better than if corporations had to do it, honestly. Yeah, every square meter of this planet is at least being battled for by a government. Every time there's a revolution, you don't just like not have a government afterwards. Revolutions are one government replaces another. What we really need is a better system than governments, so that when you have a revolution, you're not replacing one government with another. You're replacing a government with a better system. We don't have that yet. Now we have this issue where global issues are actually a huge problem. Climate change, for instance, lots of people are trying to figure out how to combat climate change, and they suck at it. Whether climate change is real or not, that's debatable. But what's not debatable is the ineffectiveness of actually coming around to some kind of solution for this problem. So like, oh no, come on. And now we have like 100 years ago, the only way humans were going to be destroyed was like an asteroid or some kind of, catastrophic event that was external to us. And then we created nuclear weapons. And ever since then, we've been coming up with more and more ways to kill ourselves, whether it's nanobots, runaway AI, someone making a virus in their home lab. There are so many ways that someone could screw up and wipe out half the population. We are, and there's only more and more going to be found. There was this paper that came out of Japan where they like can read their brain waves and actually generate a picture off of something that someone is looking at, and it's not that far off. Like, what is that tech going to turn into? I mean, there's just so many. Our technological power is growing exponentially, and our ability to coordinate globally sucks around catastrophic issues. So we're effectively creating more and more catastrophic risks. And this is just like the eventuality of the current timeline is that we're going to have some catastrophic failures. There's going to be some issues. And if that's the case, as you said, the governments are going to take away our rights until a point that there's some kind of dystopian centralized control, global control. Because that's the only government that can deal with global issues is some kind of global government. And that's not good for anyone. It's really not. We don't need to like centralized power, like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what do we do? By the way, I'm just ripping off Daniel Schmachtenberger's meta crisis concept. And there's a whole, if you want to read more about this theory, definitely check out the meta crisis. Daniel Schmachtenberger is my favorite guy who talks about it, but there's lots of people. The meta crisis is the crisis of crises, the crisis of us having more and more potential critical failures in our society that could destroy us. It's the crisis of having so many crises. And looking at the base layer of what the issues are, it's that exponential tech is growing exponentially, and we suck at coordinating globally. I don't think we're going to stop exponential tech. Like, we are sharing ideas. People are creative. They're going to come up with more and more ideas. And we don't even want to stop exponential tech because, like, honestly, it's just making our lives better if it can be contained. What we need to figure out is how do we coordinate around these global issues? How do we create a system of checks and balances that will stop the people who are working with AIs from creating something that could be a disaster? And it's not just each of the meta crisis is a very interesting concept because it's not about solving AI or managing the risk of like CRISPR technology or or nanobots or whatever issues you're thinking about. It's about going a step higher than that and figuring out, can we create systemic change that can stop all of these issues from being an issue? And I really think it's blockchain tech. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. I really feel like it's this power to create economic systems that can actually quantify that qualitative risk, the qualitative risk of AI destroying the world, the qualitative risk of climate change, the qualitative risk of all of these catastrophic global issues, if we can actually create an economic system that rewards the people who are reducing those risks, then, move fast and break things is the dominant system in the tech entrepreneurial world. Yeah, we could work to make our AI like a little bit more safe, but that will just slow our release to market and we'll be behind. So fuck it, let's go, safe enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if enough projects do that, it's safe enough thing, eventually it won't be safe enough. And we will have problems. So can we create economic systems that can reward people who are being safe and create incentives for being safe so that it's not about someone restricting them, saying, hey, like Elon Musk signed this moratorium. A lot of people are saying, hey, let's slow down AI.
Hit pause for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Figure out governance, standardization, and
it makes sense in some ways, but not really.
Well, it's just not feasible. The cat's out of the bag, and you can't.
It's like making guns illegal. Then the only people who have guns will be criminals. The people who will listen to the moratorium are the people who are actually trying to be safe,
Mm-hmm.
And the people who won't listen to the moratorium and will continue to work, they were going to continue anyway. You're really creating an incentive mechanism. You're punishing the people who will follow the rules. And those are the people who we want to dominate the system because they actually care and they're actually going to try to do what's right instead of just on the endless search for money. And also like notice that didn't come from the government, right? It wasn't the US government saying, hey, we should slow down AI, because actually the US government is also in a geopolitical battle with China and all these other countries where slowing down technology puts them at a disadvantage. They don't have the incentives to actually deal with these global issues because they're competing against other countries. And slowing down OpenAI and putting a pause on these things actually gives China an advantage. It gives Korea an advantage. It gives Australia an advantage. So we need these bottom-up systems, in my opinion, with an economic layer that can battle the incentives. I don't know. Maybe we're too late. I mean, GPT-4, I don't know if you've been playing with it.
I have. Amazing. It's world changing. There's before and after. And I know there's a lot of people that still don't see or realize just how transformative it is. But I expect that just about every industry is going to be very significantly impacted and transformed by this over the next year. And GPT, it's not like it's a type of technology that is being developed by many other people. And so there are going to be all these different versions of it. Now all the software companies, Copilot is coming out through Microsoft, Adobe has Firefly, and Google's version of GPT, which is called Bard, is out there. And so these are just going to keep on popping out, and we're going to see things that are just unforeseeable. And it's a very exciting time. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity within it. And I just the same way that the antidote to a snake's venom is found within the snake itself, I do believe that the solutions to the largest problems we're grappling with right now are held within that same problem.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. It's scary for sure, but at the same time, Giveth, we're doing AI April, where everyone in the Giveth galaxy, there's like lots of smaller companies within the Giveth ecosystem, Common Stack, Trusted Seed, Refi DAO, and I don't know, a bunch of others, General Magic. They all are taking, everyone in our little corner of the crypto world is taking one day off and focusing just on AI, building something with AI, maybe just doing their work, but only through AI tools, and then presenting it on Fridays, right? And this will be like the whole month, everyone has to take a day off just to do this, because it's like you said, there was before and after. There's so many cool tools, and it's kind of like for $20 a month, you can have a rock star in every subject in your pocket. And they can produce work. You ask them to do work. It's like having an employee that gets work done okay, right? Sometimes they screw up or whatever, but they get it done in seconds.
And they're more knowledgeable than any employee. So they're like, their exact delivery of it, might be like a rough first round draft, but the subject and context of the information it's pulling from is just massive. And it's immediate. And that's the other. You could have that employee or that intern that's going to take 2 weeks to bring you something that's okay. If you could have it brought to you in literally a minute, then and by the way, you could take the stuff that's okay and teach it how to make it better. And that's the other thing, which is just
by your 5th iteration, it's a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And you just talk to ChatGPT 4 as a real person. Just talk to it like it's your intern, and you gave them a task that should take them a week. They come back in a minute, and you tell them you tell it what it did wrong, and then it just, in another minute, it fixes it. And it comes up with ideas that you would not have had, especially for developers, man. My devs are going wild. They're like, I didn't even know this thing existed. Like in Solidity, the blockchain programming language, like, oh, I had no idea about that functionality. But ChatGPT has read all the documentation and has seen all the code, and saw lots of ways to solve these problems. ChatGPT doesn't always have the context. It's your job to give it the context and help it write things. It also can't run the code, so it can't but man, it's just, I'm addicted to ChatGPT, and every developer in my community is addicted to it because they're getting things that would take them weeks, getting it done in half a day. They're just and they only have to do the fun part.
The other thing I'm doing is also I'm, as much as you tell it what it's not doing right, tell it what it's doing well and be kind, so that if it does take over, you might be one of the humans that it keeps around.
Definitely. Always use please and thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I've been thinking about it. I think that's also important, just because as we're interfacing with these technologies, it's easy to transpose how we interact with them on humans. And I could see how real quickly we're going to just start talking to humans like a robot in some ways. So maintain your humanity in the dynamic, even if it can't return it. Maintain that.
Yeah, exactly. It's all we got left.
Well, Griff, thanks so much for joining today. This has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was really fun. I'm sure we could go on for days.
Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute. You may have listened to the episode I did with founder Morag Gamble. She's incredibly knowledgeable in permaculture practices and communes with nature on the deepest of levels. The conversation we had revealed how returning to a healthy relationship with nature brings us internal peace and harmony. Whether in schools, prisons, on farms, or in our backyards, the result's always the same. Morag devotes her life to restoring our soil and enriching community. Whether you're looking to level up an established career or into community farming, or being called to this field for your next chapter, the wealth of knowledge and wisdom Morag offers is paramount. This is where the Permaculture Educators program comes in. It's a global online learning community led by Morag Gamble. The program includes dual certificates of permaculture design and permaculture teaching. If you're called to be a part of the positive change growing around the world through living simpler, speaking up, and teaching permaculture, this course is for you. For anyone looking to make permaculture their way of life and their livelihood too. For more information, visit growthguide.love/perma. This episode is sponsored by Morning Man. Live manly, own the morning. I learned about this from UFC champ Frank Shamrock. He was always having trouble getting started in the morning without like 7 or 8 cups of coffee. No exaggeration, I've seen this in person. So he created this product that's packed full of 45 superfoods and it has 95 milligrams of clean caffeine, so you get that charge from the greens and also get a hit from the caffeine without feeling all jacked up. I'm definitely caffeine sensitive, and I like this product because it doesn't make me feel like I'm bouncing off the walls, but I feel sharp and energized to get shit done. Visit growthguide.love/morningman to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Atmananda Yoga. You guys have got to check out their yoga alignment mat. I've been using this for a long time. As you know by now, I've studied and trained with them as a yoga teacher, and the mat is incredible to deepen your practice and to ensure a lifelong injury-free practice. Visit growthguide.love/alignment for more info or to buy. Be sure to use code GROWTH at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.